Hello everyone. Today we're going to add to the guitar unit that we have by discussing some chords. Today we're going to be discussing three different chords, G, C, and D. Now the great thing about these three chords and any of the primary chords in any kind of key signature, which we'll talk about what all that means later, but if we know three primary chords, then we can play most songs because most songs use some semblance of those three chords, some arrangement of those three chords, maybe with a few extra in there, but we'll get to that. So today hopefully we can give you a good start to actually being able to accompany yourself if you're singing, or to accompany songs if someone else is singing or playing the melody or something like that. This is where it gets fun, but a few tips. Today when it comes to playing chords, we want to ensure that we're using our fingertips. I think it's much easier to play chords with your fingertips instead of playing with the flat part. If you do that, a lot of times you're going to end up bumping the strings, like strings that you don't need to play. So always try to make sure that you have a nice curl with your hand. So thumb is vertical on the back. You can probably see that from the video there. And then you want to curl your hands around so that you have some space between the neck of the guitar and your hand. Right, that's just something we have to make sure we do because it makes it easier to play and less chance for messing up. Now today I'm going to go through where your fingers should be placed for each of those three chords, and then we're going to go through playing them. Remember, this part probably takes a little bit more time than trying to learn the melody of a song, just because you have a lot more going on at the same time. So we want to make sure that we're taking our time and we're patient with ourselves. We're going to mess up. It's the first time you've done it, and that's okay. No worries there. But let's go ahead and get started. So G chord, we're using notes in the second fret and the third fret. So you want to start with your index finger. It goes on the second string A, second fret. All right, second string A, second fret. Our ring finger, the next one, goes third fret on the low E string. All right, so we're on the top two strings. And then we have our ring finger down here. On the high E string we're familiar with, in the third fret. So we have second and third finger in the third fret, and we have our our first finger in the second fret. All right. Now we do strum all six strings for this chord, so very gently. Now, one way that we can check to make sure the chords are coming out correctly is to strum one string at a time. That usually tells us if something's not quite sounding. So if I do that, everything is ringing really nice. That tells me that I've got my fingers down all the way. I'm pushing all the way towards the fretboard. If I didn't have my fingers down all the way, we would get sounds like this. Right, so all the strings that I should have been pressing, I was not pressing enough, and I got that clangy kind of unattractive sound. Right, all the strings that were open that I wasn't touching at all, they rang. But the ones that I was supposed to be pushing down but wasn't, didn't have a very attractive sound. So altogether again, if I strum the chord from the lowest sounding string to the highest sounding, so that's the G chord. One way that we can practice from there is to just do a few strums, probably 4. Then I like to take my fingers off, find the chord shape again, and strum again. Right? We want to practice that way so that we can train our fingers the distances that they need to go. Right? Because all of it's about muscle memory. That's where most of this happens. So that's our G chord. The next chord we want to introduce is C. So we want to take our index finger, first fret on the B string, our middle finger, second fret on the D string, right, fourth string there, and our ring finger, third fret on the A string. All right, so that's what we should have. And if we strum those from lowest sounding to highest sounding, right? Now, one point that I do want to mention here, if we strum the low E string, right, if we strum that as part of this chord, it's actually rearranging the chord that we have and not letting it start on the note C, right? So usually if you play a chord, you want it to start on the name of the chord. Third fret on the A string is C, so we want to strum from the fifth string down. Now, it's not necessarily bad because this E string is part of the chord, right? So it would make sense. It's actually the third note that's part of that chord. But if we want a true root position chord, we would strum from the fifth string down. If we add the other string, Not too much of a difference, but there is technically the chord has been flipped to where it's starting on the third instead of starting on the root. Those two terms we'll talk about when we get to it in theory. All right. So strum it 4 times. Stop the sound. Fingers off. Find it again. Do strum 4 times. And we just go through that process a few times until we find it. And you might want to change the tune now. So we know G and C, so we could go G, fingers off, find C, right? And just do that a few times, getting used to where those two chords fit into the spectrum here. Right, and then our final chord is D. So far we've talked about G, which is technically in this case our 1 chord, C, which is our 4 chord, and then D, which will be our 5 chord. And we're just using a regular D. At some point we'll talk about what a D7 is and how it kind of makes the music feel a little bit better, but we're just going to use a regular D chord. Index finger, 2nd fret on the G string, middle finger, 2nd fret on the high E string, and then ring finger, 3rd fret on the B string. So up close, that's what we got. I think you can see all my fingers there. Do your best not to touch the fret wires, right? Because then you're going to get a clangy sound. I like to play towards the middle. Some people disagree and play closer to the fret wire. As long as you're not touching it, it's probably going to be okay. Now, for this chord, we only want to strum the bottom 4 strings, so from the D string down. If we were to add the low E, that's going to add a member to the chord that doesn't belong, at least in this case. So D chord is the bottom four strings. Pause the sound, fingers off, find it again, strum. Great. So 2 exercises to incorporate all 3 of those. We want to do the play the chord, then take our fingers off on the next one. So we'll go like that, G, C, then D. Fingers off, find C. Fingers off, find D. Fingers off, right? And go through that and mix them up. Right now we can play them in order, 1, 4, 5, or we can play them in any order we want, right? It doesn't matter. We're just learning what the finger placement should be and what the chord should sound like. Now the last exercise, we want to do it without putting pause between them. So something more like this, and you can go whatever tempo you need to. Just use a metronome and set it to something that you can match. So G, C, and D is the pattern I'm going to use. And I finished on a G chord one more time just to kind of wrap up the whole phrase. So mix them up, play them a lot. Whenever I was learning guitar way back when I was in high school, I played those chords plus one more, which we'll learn soon. I played them 1,000 times probably, just that, right? I just worked through them. And of course, it's going to sound rough, but that's okay, right? We're learning. It's all going to be good. And this is the beginning, moving towards some actually accompanying yourselves and accompanying others and finding some of the full capabilities of what the guitar is about. So hopefully you enjoyed that. Let me know if you have questions, and we'll keep adding to this. Thanks a lot.